There's a brutal truth most people spend their whole lives running from. The world doesn't care about your pain. It doesn't wait for you to heal. It doesn't pause to comfort you. And it doesn't hand out applause just because you're struggling. At first, that sounds cold. But what if I told you this indifference could actually be your greatest freedom? Think about it. When you stop waiting for the world to notice your suffering, you stop performing. You stop begging for recognition. And in that silence, something powerful wakes up inside you, an inner strength that doesn't need witnesses, approval, or permission. That's where Stoicism begins. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that you shouldn't waste time craving recognition because everything fades. Epictetus taught that philosophy isn't meant to be explained, but lived. Both were pointing to the same truth. Your power starts when your expectations die, and in that death, your real life begins. In this video, we're going to explore how the world's indifference, instead of breaking you, can actually set you free. You'll see how pain transforms into discipline, silence becomes a teacher, and invisibility turns into strength. This isn't about ignoring your struggles, it's about reshaping them into fuel. And here's a quick favor before we dive in. If practical wisdom content like this helps you, hit the like button right now because it shows this topic matters to you. There's a moment almost everyone goes through as a teenager. You feel like if you cry loud enough, if you suffer in plain sight, somebody will notice and come rushing in to rescue you. I remember being 17 and thinking, if people see how much I'm hurting, they'll finally care. But here's the truth. No one came. Not because they hated me, not because they wished me harm, but because everyone was too busy drowning in their own storms. It's like screaming in the middle of a thunderstorm. Your voice disappears into the roar of rain and wind. You can be pouring your heart out, thinking it's the loudest sound in the universe, and yet it vanishes, swallowed by the noise of life. That's the raw truth of pain. Even when it feels unbearable to you, it rarely echoes in the minds of others. And that realization stings. It makes you wonder, am I invisible? Does my suffering mean nothing? But pause here. It's not that your pain is worthless. It's that people's attention is finite. Just as you barely notice the stranger crying in the car next to you at the stoplight, others may not see the tears running down your face. Not because they're cruel, but because they're carrying weights you'll never know. Think about a crowded coffee shop in New York City. A dozen people waiting in line, eyes glued to their phones, earbuds in, rushing through their to-do lists. If you broke down right there, maybe someone would glance up, maybe not. Most would return to their screens. Not because they don't care, but because survival mode makes us narrow. Pain becomes background noise in a world already filled with alarms. When you're young, this feels like betrayal. You expected someone to notice, to pause, to hold you. But adulthood slowly strips that expectation away. You realize no one is staying awake at night thinking about your heartbreak. No one is rehearsing ways to save you from your anxiety. The only person constantly present in your pain is you. Here's the paradox. The sooner you accept that, the lighter you become. The anger fades, the disappointment softens, because suddenly you're no longer waiting for an audience that never shows up. You stop performing your sadness like it's a play staged for others to applaud. And that shift, that quiet but piercing shift, is the beginning of strength. It's like running a marathon alone on a foggy morning. No crowd cheering, no finish line ribbon, no cameras flashing. Just your footsteps, your breath, your heart pounding. At first it feels lonely, but then something changes. You realize the absence of an audience doesn't make the run meaningless. It makes it yours, pure, untouched. The Stoics saw this clearly centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that you should never expect applause for doing the right thing, because virtue is its own reward. That's not coldness, it's liberation. The tree doesn't stop growing because no one is clapping for its roots. Why should you? Still, I know part of you resists this. You might be thinking, but isn't it human to want to be seen? Of course it is. Wanting to be understood is natural, but the trap is believing it's guaranteed. The world doesn't revolve around our pain, and strangely, that's what gives us back our freedom. Because if no one is obligated to carry your burden, then you're free to decide how to carry it yourself. And once you let that sink in, a question appears. If nobody else is watching, then who do you become when you're unseen? That's where the next step begins. At first, the realization that nobody truly cares about your pain feels like a punch in the stomach. It shakes the foundation of how you thought the world worked. You imagined sympathy was automatic, like gravity pulling others toward you. But when silence answers instead of comfort, something inside you cracks. That crack, however, is not the end. It's the beginning. Because hidden inside that silence is a strange form of freedom. If no one is there to constantly watch, judge, or applaud, you're unchained. It's like a boat tied for years to the same dock. The ropes feel safe at first, but they also keep you stuck. The moment those ropes fall away, the boat doesn't collapse. It finally sails. That's what indifference does. It doesn't push you down. It sets you loose. Yes, it stings at first. You feel abandoned, unseen, but then you notice something. The indifference of others doesn't stop you from moving forward. It simply means the current is yours to command. And when you see that, indifference turns into fuel. Think about the first time you drove alone, no one in the passenger seat. It felt scary, no one to guide you, no one to correct your mistakes. But wasn't it also thrilling? The road stretched out, and for the first time, it was entirely yours. That's what life feels like once you stop waiting for others to validate your struggle. Epictetus, the Stoic teacher who was once a slave, captured it perfectly. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. He meant that the true proof of your strength isn't in convincing people you're strong. It's in living that strength whether or not anyone notices. Recognition is nice, but resilience is real. The world's indifference can feel cold, but in truth, it's neutral. A cloudy sky doesn't care if you're heartbroken or joyful, yet the sun still rises. That neutrality means you don't have to perform or beg. You can choose, you can act, you can live without waiting for permission slips from other people. And here's the paradox that shocks most people. When you stop depending on attention, your actions become more powerful. Suddenly, every choice you make comes from authenticity, not from the hope of applause. It's like lifting weights when nobody's watching. You're no longer showing off. You're actually building strength. Picture a basketball player practicing free throws alone in an empty gym. No fans, no scoreboard, no coach. Just repetition, sweat, silence. That's where greatness is forged. Because when the crowd eventually comes, you'll be ready. Not because you needed them, but because you trained without them. That's the gift of indifference. It's not rejection. It's space. It's room for you to prove, to yourself above all, who you really are. Once you stop expecting the world to save you, you start saving yourself. And that's the quiet revolution the Stoics were pointing to all along. But if indifference frees you, then why do so many people still fall into the trap of turning their pain into performance? Let's look at that next. Here's the trap most people fall into. When they feel unseen, they try to make their pain louder. They turn suffering into a performance, hoping that if they stage it well enough, someone will finally care. But here's the problem. Performing pain doesn't heal it. It only drains you while giving the illusion of attention. Think about social media. You've seen it. People posting vague, cryptic messages about heartbreak, betrayal, or exhaustion. The flood of likes and comments feels comforting for a moment, but once the notifications stop, the silence rushes back in, heavier than before. It's not medicine, it's sugar, sweet at first but empty. It's like bleeding in the middle of a crowded plaza. Sure, people will look. Some may gasp, some may even take pictures. But does that attention actually stop the bleeding? Of course not. All it does is expose your wound to the world without giving it time to heal. That's the danger. When you turn your pain into a spectacle, you attach your healing to other people's reactions, and people are fickle. One day they'll cheer you on, the next they'll scroll past. You can't build steady strength on such unstable ground. It's the same in everyday life. At work, some people complain loudly in meetings, hoping someone will recognize how much they're struggling. At family dinners, others dramatize their frustrations waiting for applause. But notice what happens. Instead of respect, they often get eye rolls. Performance rarely earns dignity. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus reminded his students, don't explain your philosophy, live it. In other words, your life speaks louder than your pain broadcasted for sympathy. Silence, discipline, and steady action leave a mark far deeper than theatrics ever could. Here's the irony: performing pain often keeps you trapped in it. The more you narrate it, the more you rehearse it, the more it cements itself into your identity. You stop being a person who's going through pain and start being the one who suffers. Much soon, that role can swallow your entire sense of self. But what happens if you step out of that role? If you stop begging for the world's applause and start owning your pain quietly? That's when transformation begins. Because instead of pouring your energy into proving how hurt you are, you pour it into healing, growing, and building resilience. It doesn't mean you should bury emotions. It means you stop outsourcing their validation. You face them, own them, and let them fuel your actions, not your performance. There's a difference between expression and exhibition. One is strength, the other is dependence. So if performance is a trap, then where do you actually learn strength in silence? The answer might surprise you. Silence often feels like punishment. When no one rushes in to comfort you, the quiet can feel unbearable, almost cruel. But what if silence isn't abandonment at all? What if silence is the classroom where real strength is taught, the place where you stop waiting for applause and start listening to yourself? Think of a tree growing in the middle of a forest. Nobody claps for its roots as they push deeper into the soil. No spotlight shines on the slow expansion of its trunk. And yet, year after year, it grows stronger in absolute silence. Its power doesn't depend on being seen. It depends on being steady. That's how life trains you. Every time you're left alone with your struggles, it feels harsh at first. But those moments are where resilience is forged. Silence strips away the distractions, the noise of opinions, and forces you to face the raw material of your own mind. It's uncomfortable, but it's also refining. The Stoics often reminded themselves that discipline thrives when no one is watching. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations for the public. He wrote them as a private conversation with himself. Why? Because he knew the most important work happens in silence, long before the world ever sees the results. In modern life, silence is rare. Our phones buzz, notifications scream, someone always has something to say. That's why many people run from it. They confuse quiet with emptiness. But silence isn't empty. Silence is full of answers, if you stay long enough to hear them. Imagine sitting in a quiet room after a hard day. At first, your thoughts are loud, restless, and chaotic. You want to distract yourself. But if you resist the urge, if you just sit with it, the noise begins to settle. Slowly, clarity rises. You see things as they are, not as your emotions distort them. That's the gift silence gives. It's like lifting weights without music blasting in your ears. Every rep feels heavier, harder, more real. But that's the training. Without distraction, you can't escape the strain. And without escape, you finally build the muscles that last. Silence is the gym of the soul. Even pain feels different in silence. Instead of performing it for the world, you experience it for what it is. Temporary, raw, human. And in that space, you start to realize pain doesn't have to define you. It can teach you. It can shape you. It can sharpen you. So next time silence surrounds you, resist the urge to label it as loneliness. See it as a teacher, one that doesn't flatter, doesn't sugarcoat, but also never lies. Silence is honest, and in honesty, you find your edge. But if silence builds discipline, then what about invisibility? Can being unseen actually become a source of power? Let's explore that next. There's a deep fear inside most people, the fear of being unseen. We crave recognition, validation, and acknowledgement. But here's the paradox. Some of the strongest growth happens in the shadows, when nobody is paying attention. Invisibility can feel like a curse, but under Stoic eyes, it's a hidden gift. Think about diamonds. Before they shine in jewelry stores, they exist as rough, unpolished stones buried deep underground. For years, they're unseen, untouched, unnoticed, yet their value doesn't depend on being displayed. Their worth was already there, waiting to be revealed. Your strength works the same way. History is filled with people who lived in obscurity, serving quietly, never chasing fame. Stoic soldiers fought in Rome's legions without songs written in their names. They didn't wait for recognition to carry out their duty. They did it because duty itself was enough. That's the essence of invisible strength, value without applause. In everyday life, invisibility shows up everywhere. You may stay late at work, fixing problems no one else notices. You may hold your family together in ways that don't make it into thank you speeches. It's invisible labor, but it doesn't make it meaningless. If anything, it proves resilience without the spotlight. Here's the shift. Once you accept invisibility, you stop wasting energy begging for validation. Instead, you invest it in building something unshakable inside. When you no longer need people to see you, you start working with freedom. You stop being controlled by their gaze. That's real independence. It's like training in the dark before dawn. Nobody's there to watch your push-ups. Nobody's clapping for your miles run. But when the light comes and challenges appear, you're already prepared. Your invisible work becomes visible results. And people will wonder how you became so strong suddenly. They'll never know it was built in silence. The Stoics warned against chasing fame. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "All is ephemeral, fame and the famous as well." To him, recognition was smoke in the wind. What mattered was whether your actions aligned with virtue. Invisibility, then, wasn't weakness. It was protection from vanity. Being unseen also teaches humility. When no one notices, you learn to keep moving without applause. That humility becomes armor, because if praise doesn't build you, criticism can't break you. You stand firm, grounded, steady, untouched by the swings of public opinion. And maybe that's the greatest strength of all, to know that your value doesn't vanish when nobody's watching, to understand that your life matters not because it's broadcast, but because it's lived with integrity. Invisibility sharpens you into someone who moves quietly but leaves lasting marks. But here's the real turning point. What happens when invisibility shifts into awareness? That moment when you realize you've always been your own witness. Let's step into that next. There's a moment in every life when you realize something startling. You've been the only one present for every single second of your journey, from your first heartbreak to your quiet victories, from the tears no one saw to the nights you thought you wouldn't make it. You were always there. That makes you the most faithful witness of your own existence. At first, that might sound lonely. You may think, so no one really knows me. But flip it around. Who else knows the depth of your struggles like you do? Who else has felt every beat of your heart when it raced with fear? Every drop of sweat when you pushed through exhaustion? Every sigh of relief when you finally stood up again? Only you. That intimacy with yourself is power. Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." Becoming your own witness means you stop depending on the outside world to validate what you've lived. You already know the battles you've fought. You already know the scars you've earned. Why beg someone else to confirm what you've seen with your own eyes? Think about standing in front of a mirror. Most people only check if their reflection looks acceptable to others. Hair in place, clothes neat. But what if you use the mirror differently? What if you looked into your own eyes, not to check appearances, but to recognize the person who endured, who carried, who refused to quit? That's witnessing. When you become your own witness, you stop chasing applause because you realize you've been clapping for yourself all along. Every late-night study session, every early morning workout, every choice to keep going, that was you keeping score, not the crowd. And the scoreboard in your mind is the only one that truly matters. It's like journaling. The page doesn't care if your words are beautiful. It doesn't hand out trophies. But when you return to those pages years later, you see the record of a person who grew. The journal becomes proof that you were present, that you bore witness to your own becoming. This shift is liberating. When you trust yourself as your witness, you stop over-explaining. You stop needing to broadcast your struggles for approval. You already know what you carried. You already respect it. And that quiet self-respect builds an unshakable core. The Stoics lived this truth. Epictetus didn't demand validation from Rome. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his reflections for historians. They bore witness to their own minds, knowing that self-examination was more valuable than public recognition. Their wisdom wasn't performance, it was presence. And here's the paradox. Once you become your own witness, the opinions of others lose their grip. Praise doesn't intoxicate you. Criticism doesn't paralyze you. You're anchored in something deeper, your own awareness of what you've endured and who you're becoming. But if you are your own witness, then the next question is, how do you take all that pain you've carried and transform it into discipline that reshapes your life? Let's step into that now. Pain has a way of knocking the wind out of you. At first, it feels useless, like a weight dragging you down. But the Stoics believed pain could be fuel, not something to escape, but something to forge into strength. The question isn't, why did this happen to me? But what can I build with this? That's where discipline begins. Think of rejection. Maybe you didn't get the job, the promotion, or the recognition you worked for. That sting hurts deeply, but it also gives you a choice. You can sit in bitterness, or you can turn that sting into fire, showing up earlier, training harder, studying deeper. Discipline is pain redirected with purpose. It's like lifting weights. The burn in your muscles isn't punishment, it's progress. Pain signals growth. In the same way, life's emotional burns can either break you or build you depending on how you respond. The Stoics chose to see pain as a teacher, not a jailer. Think about the college student who studies late at night, alone in a quiet dorm room, while others are out partying. No one claps for them. No one notices the hours. But years later, when they graduate and launch a career, the discipline shaped by solitude speaks louder than any applause ever could. Or picture the athlete training before dawn, running laps on an empty track, their breath visible in the cold air, shoes pounding against silence. Nobody's there to cheer, yet those invisible mornings are exactly what prepare them for the visible victories. Pain sharpened into routine becomes strength that cannot be faked. The Stoics used this same method. They practiced voluntary discomfort, sleeping on hard beds, fasting, walking barefoot, not to punish themselves, but to teach their minds that pain can be endured, even chosen. Because once you learn to carry pain willingly, it stops owning you. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you turn pain into progress. Waking up early, saying no to distractions, focusing when it's easier to quit, all of these are micro-rebellions against weakness. And each one is proof. Pain isn't the enemy. Indulgence without restraint is. It's like forging iron into a sword. The fire is harsh, the hammering relentless, the process violent. But without that intensity, iron remains raw and useless. Pain is the forge, discipline is the blade, and you are the blacksmith of your own character. The beauty is that this process doesn't require applause. Discipline is invisible most of the time. It's built in private, in quiet choices no one sees. But eventually the world notices, not because you demanded it, but because the results are undeniable. So the question becomes, if pain can be turned into discipline, what happens when discipline reshapes your entire life philosophy? That's where the conclusion begins to take form. So what do you do with the truth that the world doesn't care about your pain? You turn it into power. You stop waiting for applause, stop performing for sympathy, and start building a strength that belongs only to you. That's the hidden gift of Stoicism. It takes indifference and transforms it into freedom. Silence, invisibility, rejection, none of these have to break you. They can become your greatest teachers if you let them. And the discipline born from pain has a way of shaping you into someone steady, resilient, and unshakable. Now ask yourself, how much of your energy is still wasted waiting for others to notice you? What would your life look like if you stopped chasing recognition and started moving with quiet conviction? These are the questions worth carrying into tomorrow. If this message resonated with you, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss more reflections like this. Every subscription here is like a silent vote for inner strength, a reminder that wisdom still matters in a noisy world. At the end of the day, applause fades, opinions shift, but character remains. And the person you become in silence, that's the person who can never be taken away from you.